we have been focused, I believe, excessively, both in the United States and most particularly in Europe, on a focus on debt and deficit reduction. Somewhat understandable, because that's the problem that we supposedly got ourselves into. And the idea, for example, that you and I, as individuals, we need to balance our checkbooks, right? That's the responsible thing to do. And it's fairly easy to transform that or transfer that to say the government should balance its checkbook as well. It seems to make sense on the face of it. Of course, it doesn't take into account that the government has the ability to print money and the government has the ability to tax. Neither of which, you and I, at least I don't, you may, we don't have that ability. And therefore, the government has certain potential that we don't. And when the private sector is deleveraging, reducing its debts, reducing its consumption, then it's pretty incumbent on the public sector to offset that. And that's the whole debate between what should the fiscal policy really be. Should it be deficit reduction or fiscal stimulus? And I think we could have done a much better job of kind of sequencing those things. In other words, when the economy is very weak, we should be trying to stimulate it. As you stimulate it and grow, the deficit should kind of by itself come down, or if it doesn't, you should be in a stronger position to start to reduce your public sector stimulus, because the economy has hopefully kind of got its legs under it, or caught fire a little bit and is able to grow more rapidly on its own. But at this point, we have a situation where we don't really have that government desire. But I do think there are one or two things that's very powerful and very positive that we could potentially put to use. So the growth strategy really seeks to take advantage of that which is in abundance, namely global capital. There's a lot of money around. You look at the interest rates that are being charged for corporate debt, government debt. There's plenty of money around. So we take advantage of that excess capital. And America has always been known as a place where capital is happy to come to. So we make use of that which is in abundance to fix that which is broken, namely the U.S. infrastructure environment, where our latest American Society of Civil Engineers, our latest grade, came out and it was a D+. D+. And the U.S. ranks globally 25th in terms of the quality of our infrastructure. So very fact-based, very independent perspectives suggest that we have a real problem with our infrastructure. It goes from water, ports, roads, bridges, tunnels, broadband, for example. It really runs the gamut. And there's an interesting way of thinking about it. If you consider the history of the United States, we have moved from east to west. And all our infrastructure basically goes in that direction. Our highway system, our railroads, everything goes east to west. There's some thinking that suggests, Joel Kopkin and others have suggested, that the next phase of infrastructure is much more of a north-south. And that fits in with this idea of kind of regional integration. So we're integrating kind of from Canada through the United States, south into Mexico, and further south down to Latin America. So we have an abundance of capital, cheap capital, interest rates as low as they've been in modern, let's call it certainly post-World War II period. We have an infrastructure problem that desperately needs to get fixed. We can fix that infrastructure, finance it through that excess capital, generate high-paying, good-quality jobs in the United States, rebuild and ensure the rebirth of Middle America, that thesis I mentioned earlier, and foster integration with Latin America, because that's where we can generate some of the raw material demand from. And therefore, we present ourselves with two things, right? We go back to the two challenges. One, how do we generate more robust U.S. growth path? This strategy does that. Two, how do U.S. policymakers ensure that the next phase of globalization is positive? We do that by demonstrating the U.S. ability to generate our own production and investment-led demand, and we integrate the Americas more fully through sourcing some of the raw materials for that rebuilding process in Latin America. And we present the world with what I believe is the future iteration of global economy, what I call tripolar 2020.